so yeah, we're going.
All right, so you should see us if you're on YouTube, because I will not log on to YouTube.
I just had to recycle it. Yeah, I can see us.
Okay, so we should be good, and people should. It might take a few minutes for people to join, and while we're doing that, I'm going to see if I can't. All right, so you should see us if you're on YouTube. Oh, is there a delay?
Log on to YouTube. I turned my YouTube off. I muted it.
Okay. Okay, so we should be good, and people should.
Because we're getting feedback.
Okay.
To join, and while we're doing that, I'm going to see if I can. Yeah, there's a bit of a delay in the video.
Oh, is there a delay?
I can't hear you at all now.
I've not said anything because I didn't know if the delay was bad for you while I'm talking like right now, or if you're good.
No, I'm good.
Okay, perfect.
The video is like crazy delayed, but that might just be the internet or something, I guess.
Okay, so if you turn the audio off on YouTube, you can still hear me, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that because when you have it on,
because I didn't know if the delay was bad for you.
I'm getting a bunch of feedback.
Right now, or if you're good. Well, I have the audio turned off on YouTube.
Okay, perfect. I don't know why I would hear that. Okay, so if you turn the audio off on YouTube, you can still hear me, correct? Hold on. Now I know why. Sorry. Okay, now YouTube's off, so I'm good.
Okay.
What a way to get started, huh?
we lost like 3 people. They're like, God, these guys are bumbles.
Oh, well, it is what it is, I suppose. Let me see if I can.
Now there's 4.
Let me see if I can. What I'd like to see is if for those of you guys, first of all, welcome that are joining our chaos this evening. If you guys could drop stuff in chat. Kevin is working chat through YouTube. I'm actually streaming, so I'm not on YouTube for the platform. So the chat that I see will be what you guys are seeing on screen as it rolls and scrolls through the middle of our feed here. But I don't know if it's going to work. That's the hurdle. There we go. I'm good. I can see that. Can you see it, Kevin?
I can. Hold on a sec. We're 2 guys. I'm totally a bumble with this stuff, so you guys have to like give me some leeway here. I don't know who's. Darn it. What's he doing here?
Yeah, Kevin, your mic. It just could be a function of we've only tested a couple times, so I don't know if you have those controls that you can turn your volume up easily.
Well, I haven't said anything, so.
Okay. So you might be a little bit.
Now?
I can hear you perfectly fine, but Bob's comment is that your mic could come up a little bit, so you might just have to speak up a little bit as we get rolling here.
Well, I can turn the gain up on it too. It's upside down, so I'm trying to. I think that's the gain all the way up. Is that good?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
So I'll go back through once we're done tonight, and I'll listen and see if there's some things that I can find that'll help us as we plow through and do these regularly, so that we're good to go. I'm trying to find one more piece here that I want to pull to the top. Or so
I'm not seeing. Where are we seeing the comments? Because I'm not seeing any comments.
The comments for me come up right in between yours and iPicture.
Oh, right. Okay, there we go. Jason's mic is good, but Kevin's could stand to come up a little bit.
Right. So this is an interface. So thank you guys first of all for jumping on so that Kevin and I can work through some of these things, and we'll hammer this out. I promise. We're trying to do things a little bit unique in that we just want this opportunity as we plow forward to be able to share screens, and Zoom is not really good for that. Skype is not good for that. So we're using Discord. So I just need to get with Kevin. So bear with us tonight so that we can figure out how to maybe make some camera and mic adjustments on Kevin's side as we plow through this. But I've got a piece up here where that microphone is that I'm not going to mess with it for tonight, but it's got Kevin and I's names so that you know who each one of us is, as part of the stream piece as people jump in. So I'll just leave that alone. I'll fix it for next time, and we'll get rolling. So I don't know how many people are on. Kevin, you let me know if you can see that. It doesn't tell me because I'm on a live stream feed through Streamlabs.
So it says we've got a giant audience of 4 people. So.
400 people? That's fantastic.
Right. 400 people, that's what I said.
Well, let's do this. Why don't you introduce yourself and just kind of go through how you got plugged into 3D modeling and why the steel mill side and the experience that you have, types of printers that you've been working with through the years, and then I can kind of do the same for these guys. And then if they've got questions related to the different industries that each of us kind of focus on, we can pick up those questions and talk about that stuff, or we can just get in and dig through, a segment of how we do research and development or things like that on planning for the design side of 3D printed models. So with that, I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, so I'm Kevin Tully. I'm a steel mill modeler. I own Steel Mill Modeler Supply. And I basically lucked into 3D printing parts because I had 4 blast furnaces that I'm going to build for our local model train club, and watching Jeff Bourne's videos, I'm a professional fabricator in real life, and I watched Jeff cut out all the pieces to make a gate valve, which you need 15 of to do a set of stoves for a blast furnace. And I estimated that was about 45 minutes per valve to cut all those things out, and then I watched him put them together, and that looked like about another 45 minutes. And I actually met Jeff at one of the Steel Mill Modelers meets, and I asked him that, and he said, yeah, it is actually about an hour and a half to build a valve. And I said, okay, so that's an hour and a half times 60. And so I thought, well, I need to just draw this stuff in CAD and then get it, have it 3D printed. And I started looking around for a service to do that, or how I was going to do it myself. And through a series of unfortunate events, I ended up buying a Formlabs Form 2 and printing the valves for myself.
But you had
having to put one.
You had filament before that, correct?
No, I went right into SLA.
Oh, wow, you started. Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, because I'm not a techie guy, too, I was looking for a printer that had kind of seamless, CAD to product kind of deal.
Right.
And in my research, I knew the guys that originated Fusion 360. I knew one of them very well, a guy named Aaron Lundgren. And he ended up telling me, the guy that owns Formlabs actually used to work for Autodesk, who does Fusion 360. And when he started Autodesk, or when he started Formlabs, he decided that he would call up Autodesk and say, hey, would you put a selection in your drop-down box for 3D printing in Fusion that would feed right into our slicer program? And they said yes. So if you use Fusion 360, you can send your models directly to Preform, and Preform does everything for you.
Okay.
As far as the printer settings go, and then you can just go to printing. And there's a little bit of learning on orienting the part and setting up the supports and whatnot, but it is pretty seamless. And for me, I didn't mind paying the extra money because that's really kind of what it breaks down to. You're paying the extra money really for the slicer program, the ability that it does all the settings within the printer, and it prints incredibly nice models.
So have you used the Chi2 software or Lychee slicing software, or you're only the one specific to the form printer?
I've only used the preform that is their proprietary slicer.
Okay.
Because that's I don't. I'm not really sure if you can talk to a Form 2 without using preform. I guess you can. I never really asked that question.
Okay.
On my FDM stuff, I use what's it called? Oh, I lost my screens here. Hold on.
You're not using like a
Simplify 3. I use S3D. I use S3D Pro.
Well, shoot! Between the two of us, then we'll be able to cover just about all the different slicers. Because I used to use Chi2. I don't anymore. I'm a lychee slicer guy now for resin. But I use Prusa slicer because I run an MK2S for the filament. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. Well, I just I was just going to say that I put up some of the models that I did on the Steel Modelers page on Facebook, and some of the guys on there were like, "Hey, are you going to sell those?" And of course, that got the wheels turning.
Right.
And, I thought, well, sure, and then I had people starting to ask me for other things, and originally I was just kind of making the stuff that I needed, and then I had a lot of guys saying, "Hey, could you make this or could you make that?" And the product line just kind of grew organically, really just trying to fill that need. And I had a customer who bought a bunch of stuff from me, and then he started asking me about doing it himself, which I kind of knew he was going to do because he was already a CAD guy.
Yeah.
And I was kind of the first, at least for SLA or resin. I was the first guy on the block as far as that I know of for the steel modeling community, because the printers were crazy expensive then, and there wasn't the Elegoo's and the other more inexpensive printers back then.
Right.
I mean, it's like 4 years. It's like 4 years ago. The Form 2 was pretty new, and it was revolutionary in desktop printing. And I knew that I wasn't always going to be the only guy on the block, so I just wanted to help people out and get their modeling going and do some really cool stuff, and try to keep the price point down so the guys could afford the stuff. But ultimately, yeah, that's where I'm at in all of this craziness.
So what? Let me ask this before I chat here real quick. What drove you into the steel mill side? Because I've always been fascinated, but it's never been something that's crept to like the top 4 or 5 items on my list. It's on there, but I picked the opposite with the chemical oil refinery stuff because I wanted to see all the pipes, but the steel mills have all that stuff too. So what drove you to the steel industry?
I think, to be honest with you, I think I've always had a fascination with gigantic man-made machinery and factories and things.
Okay.
And I mean, other than maybe a Boeing plant or something like that, you really kind of can't get a much larger facility than a steel mill.
Correct.
And everything in it is just gigantically enormous. I mean, I've always been fascinated with man-made machines that are just ridiculously huge. And of course, blast furnaces and basic oxygen furnaces and open hearts and all that kind of stuff. It all fits into it. And probably much like you, I like the aspect of all the pipes and electrical cables running everywhere and all the details and stuff. So,
well, I have a lot more flexibility than you do, though, because the refinery side of things, people, at least that I haven't found any yet, they're not tied into I have to model a specific refinery. And everything is very generic, whereas I've noticed with the steel mill side, there's some pretty big specifics based on which mill you're modeling, like with the hot stoves and the blast furnaces and the sizes of all those pieces and actually the configuration. So it's interesting to me to watch you model that stuff, and I've realized, yeah, Kevin can do that. That's not my thing. I'm into the modular side of stuff instead of kind of that stuff with the steel mills, but I'll
well, the thing about the steel mills is, there's actually a picture that really struck me when I was looking through one of my books, and it was a row of 4 blast furnaces. And I mean, you figure they didn't build those all at one time. Typically,
right.
they might build two at a time, but for four to be constructed all at one time, I don't know. That seems kind of rare. I'm sure that's happened somewhere that I'm just not aware of. But the thing that struck me was the dust collectors on all four of the furnaces were like completely different. And I get that they were building different furnace column designs and stuff for output and maybe even what type of iron they were going to make or whatever.
Right.
But you would think the ancillary things kind of wouldn't change. The stoves, the electrostatic precipitator. You think that would almost be like off-the-shelf components that they would plug in, much like I'm sure some of the stuff in your refineries are.
Right.
And it just didn't seem to be that way. And I actually asked one of the guys in the steel modeling page, I put up a picture of this furnace row, and it posed that question: why is all this stuff different? I get the furnace columns might be different, but what about all the other equipment? And one of the guys answered up that was an engineer. That's what's great about that page. There's all these guys that are just retirees and they're engineers and whatnot. And he said that it was literally, and like any other architectural firm, the companies were trying to outdo each other and compete for design contracts, and they would always come through and say, "Oh, we have this new dust collector, we have this new whatever, and it's better than the last design or better than the newest design of another company or whatever." And he reckoned some of it was kind of BS. It was just marketing stuff, but some of it probably was updated designs or somebody just had a better idea. And so even though and that particular mill may not have had the same engineering firm designing all four of those blast furnaces, especially if they were built 2, 3, 5, 10 years apart or whatever. So you're right in that a lot of the stuff is unique to a specific mill, but on the other side of that, there's a lot of things like burners and gate valves and those kind of things that are really kind of common to almost any mill. So, and I kind of always used that as something, I wanted everything that I was trying to provide for these guys to be the common one or the most used one, because it would be the one that maybe was in the mill they were trying to model if they were trying to model a specific mill.
Gotcha. Well, with that, I'll introduce myself here real quick so that those are on can at least learn a little bit about me and my background. And I'm Jason Reese, and Kevin and I started talking a while back about trying to pull something together. My background is actually, I'm a licensed architect. I practice architecture in 3 states. And really the thing that drove me into the 3D print side was for my profession. I was building architectural models between 5 and 10 years ago, and everything the traditional way, kind of in a shop, and in some cases without 3D printing. And then I bought my first 3D printer 6 years ago, and then upgraded to the Prusa, the filament printer 5 years ago. That I still run that filament printer today. I've not had a need to upgrade anything on that machine for 5 years, and it still prints beautifully. But it got me into the mindset of, how can I apply this to my modeling hobby and start figuring out, ways to be more efficient with modeling? Because I'm not an operator. If I just describe myself on the model railroad side, I'm a model builder. And so I'd rather build an entire module, that's 6-7 foot long, 12 inches, 18 inches deep, and 1 or 2 tracks on it, and everything else is buildings. That's my architectural mindset. So I dabbled with the filament stuff for about 1.5 to 2 years before I jumped into resin, because I realized filament was not going to get me where I wanted to go. And this is even before thinking with the refinery stuff, that I wanted to be able to capture details in my buildings, windows, custom parapets, things that I could do that would be applied to kits that Walthers or somebody else is making, that would customize them that nobody else would have. So once I got into that piece of it, then I started thinking about, well, what else can I do with this from the modular aspect? And that's when I started digging in 1.5 years ago with the dynamic preservation model stuff, with all the infill pieces that I do. And then it wasn't until 1 year ago when I was processing this, is the steel mill going to climb to the top of my list, or do I embark on the refinery piece? And I chose the refinery side, partly because I saw you and there's one or two other guys, a year ago that were already tackling that stuff. And so from my perspective, I was like, well, when I get around to that, I'll just get a hold of one of these guys and buy what I want to do at that point, because I wanted to focus on the refinery. My draw is the large refineries that have the full capabilities. Yeah, I think it's like a level 4, level 5 refinery. And so that's where I wanted to see how could I combine the 3D resin printing aspect with the modular components of PVC pipe and styrene tubing and those kinds of things. So that's really where I dove in, really all in last year. And probably, I think it was May when I got a little bit more serious about keeping my Facebook page updated and kind of showing people the process I was going through with some of the models I was working on. Because I mean, success and failure didn't matter to me. It was something that we could all learn from. And I learned real quick that people struggled significantly with the support side of things, because my perspective is they're making it more difficult than it needs to be, and everybody's into trying to tilt things at the perfect angle. And I think you're kind of like me, man. If I can print it straight off the build plate, that's the route I'm going, because the angles are eventually going to hit a surface somewhere that caused some kind of issue with 3D printing. We can only get so fine, and we'll still see some layer lines. But that's really what drove me to the resin side. And then I took the opposite approach that you did, not because I didn't want to spend money, but because I'm a tinkerer, I guess, by nature. And so the first resin printer I bought was the Anycubic Photon, and then about a year later I picked up the Creality LD002R, and then the third one when the Elegoo Saturn came out and all that pre-launch hype that happened last summer. That's right when I was jumping into the refinery stuff. I said I want to try the large format mono screen, because the RGBs just don't have quite the resin or quite the detail capability as the monos do. And then I just picked up the E-Packs last October, November. Again, another small format, because most of the pieces I'm doing are smaller. But it works great because it's a 4K resolution mono screen. And so I have 4 printers that are probably at the price point of the one Form 2 that you bought, but I got to tinker with mine. There is a big difference, and I think that'll be kind of fun to get into when you set up models and we talk about the design, the projects you're working on, and you'll be like, yeah, I just threw it into preform and hit the button, and 4 hours later I had the print I wanted, and I'm going to be, yeah, I had to go in and make adjustments based on what I wanted, and it took me, an hour to get it all prepped. And my print is probably slower than the form printer. My E-Packs is fast. But I don't know how quick the form printer is kicking stuff out, but the technology is probably close, I think, to the Form 2. I don't think, with the exception of maybe some of the new mono screens that are out with Anycubics, I think it's the Mono X, that might be comparable to the Form 3. I don't know for sure. So maybe we just need to figure out how to get you plugged into the Form guys and get them to get you a printer to test, so you can move on from the Form 2.
Well, I plan on getting a Form 3 within the next year, but they print in such different styles, because mine is a stereolithography, so it's using a single laser with 2 mirrors to focus and aim the laser, and the layer line itself is created by the laser darting back and forth to essentially print the layer,
Okay.
From one side to another, whereas yours is flashing an entire layer in one go.
Right.
So yours is probably faster. I'm not really sure what the resolution difference might be. I would think yours would be faster just because it's printing an entire layer in one flash, and I'm sure it's a microsecond or something like that flash. Whereas, like I ordered some. I don't know if anybody, the three people in the audience, if any of you guys are modeling locomotives, diesel locomotives, if you're actually doing that or just buying ready to run stuff that's all super detailed. But I still very much enjoy um, actually modeling an engine and taking all the I do a lot of I love 40 SD40-2, so I use a lot of Athearn blue box undecorated 40-2s, and I sit in for an evening and I carve all the hand railing stanchions off, or the not hand railing stanchions, the grab irons off.
Yeah.
And I drill out the fans, and I cut all the fan housing off and all the lift rings and everything, and I mean I like go to town on it. Put a Canon company cab on it. Well, you can't get fans right now. You can get fan blades from Plano, but you can't get fan housings. Um, Detail Associates is like nobody knows what's going on with those guys. Supposedly, at Canon and Company, the molds are worn out for their really nice fans for the housings. And
Yeah.
he's not going to redo the mold for some reason. I wouldn't think that guy would be a multi-millionaire with as many Canon and Company parts as he's sold over the years. I know he sold a ton of them to me. But anyway, I found this guy online who has answered the call, and he does actually nicer than what either of those companies were producing. And I messaged him. He has a Facebook page. I messaged him, and he's actually printing the fan housings on a Mars 2. And
Okay.
You buy the Plano fan blade and the Plano screens, which he said I was thinking about etching that stuff myself, and I'm like, no, you're smart. I always say good fabricators in my shop. I tell the new guys, I say good fabricators are lazy fabricators, and that means that if you can buy something, it's all time and money, right?
Yeah.
If you can buy something for a little bit of money, why do you want to spend your time trying to do it yourself? And this guy took an already available component from Plano, and I think it's all about. To do a whole 40-2, I think it's probably about $6 or $7 worth of their etchings.
Yeah.
To do the five fans, if you've got a dynamic brake model, the 5 fans on top, blades and screens. And here this guy is selling these fan housings, 2 for, I think I think the one is $2.50 or something. I thought it was very reasonable.
And he's 3D printing them all.
Myself. Yeah, he's 3D printing these things, and he doesn't have just like screen captures from the CAD. He's got photos of one up close on a locomotive, and they're really nice.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the time is money thing for me. I've got this crazy expensive printer, but I would have to draw up the fan housing, and then figure out how to orient it and blah 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 blah. And this guy's already done it all, and actually to keep the guy in business, I'm happy to pay it. So
yeah.
I ordered I ordered 2 locomotives worth, so I ordered 10 fan housings the other day from him, and I'm sure I'll get them, in a couple of weeks I'll have them, and then I can start. I really just ordered them to see what they looked like because I've got like 7 SD40-2s I want to build, and as I've noticed that the detail parts companies were twirling the bowls, so to speak.
Yeah.
I've been going to hobby shops and around the internet, pilfering all the parts that I need, purchasing all the parts I need. I have like a giant baseball card index of nothing but detail parts for these engines, but this guy made one, and it's the same. He's got a Mars 2, and I was looking at the print in the photographs, and they're just as nice as anything that would come off of my Form 2. The one thing he did tell me was that he didn't think that it would stand up to production runs of parts, and I've actually worn out a couple of Form 2s with how much stuff I've printed over the years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that's kind of a misnomer because the printer didn't actually die. The laser started to die in one of them, and in another one, my cartridge reader started to die, and the laser dying had to go to them to get it repaired. So they have a flat rate fee where you send the whole printer to them, and they send you a new one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or they send you a refurbished one, I'm
Refurbished,
sorry,
yeah.
but it's new, you know, and it comes with a warning warranty. So I've had to do that twice. Um, but the new Form 3, all of those things that they discovered in the Form 2 that would wear out, um, they they've made into cartridges. So you buy the printer, and if the laser goes to die, you can just buy another laser cartridge and swap it out yourself.
Yeah, that's
So,
good. Because that's how
oh
that's
yeah,
how
it's printed
the
down already.
yeah that's the cheaper how the cheaper printers are made. I mean, I've swapped out 2 screens now, and that's all I've had to replace. And it's a consumable, but it's like $30. It's not bad. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I haven't talked to you about this yet, I have a very strong opinion about the Colts 3D pages, the Thingiverse pages, and the models that are
Mm-hmm.
on those pages. I'm curious what your thoughts are, and just be candid on how you see other people's models, because I see the model railroad group of modelers trying to gravitate into just grabbing everything they can online that somebody else has modeled for free, and then they struggle with trying to understand why they can't get it to print. So I'm curious what your thought is, if you have an opinion on that piece.
I don't know. Some of the stuff I haven't looked on Thingiverse in a while. Some of the things that were on Thingiverse were were nicely drawn. Um, Other items were, I'm not really sure what guys are going after on there. Like I saw an ore hopper on there, and I thought, oh, I wonder how that looks. So I downloaded the file and I put it in my. Now, of course, most of that stuff that you get off of there you can't edit.
Right.
Um, I downloaded this ore car body and I loaded it into Fusion 360 and I started looking at it, and it was nice, but it was obvious that all the little rivet detail wasn't there, and it was really just kind of a placeholder for maybe a guy that had a printer and didn't want. And there's a place for that stuff. In the old
Right.
days there used to be a place for Tycho and Bachman
Yep.
and Lifelike. Um, they were the $1.50 cars. When I was a kid, they were $1.50 car.
Yep.
But so I suppose that kind of file is going to have the same place in model railroading. I mean, I've seen there's a guy on one of the pages that I'm on Facebook, and he actually has made coke hoppers out of cardstock, and that's to me that's kind of a like 1950s thing. I've read a lot of the old model railroaders, and you see that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so I suppose some of those things have a place there, but some of the stuff, I mean, as well as I do that you draw something in CAD based on your experience and what will actually print on your printer.
Right.
And that's your experience with your printer and your CAD experience. And a guy that's getting the free version of Fusion and has gone and bought a $400, uh, photocell printer. I don't even know what those are called. What's your printers called that have the LCD screen in them?
It's an SLR. SLA.
SLR.
Yeah.
SLR. Okay. So if a guy's got a $400 SLR printer and he downloads that stuff and really doesn't know how to use the slicer, I'm not so sure that he's really going to get what he's thinking he's going to get out of it. Now, if they downloaded that and sent it off to somebody like Shapeways and selected the kind of plastic they wanted it out of, or resin or whatever they're getting it printed out of, and they ordered 20 of them, I suppose they would get exactly what they sent the people.
Right.
Because it was dude, it was like it was a year, it was a solid year of printing stuff. Before I realized just how, like, I started doing experiments with how thin I could get the printer to print something. Like I can print the in these Pogog valves. I don't know if that'll focus on that. the lens, the lens in the goggle valve, this guy here, that lens is only 20 thousandths thick, and
Wow.
not. If I wanted to print them myself, I could probably. I mean, just for myself, I don't think I would sell them, but I could probably get it to print more like 15 thousandths.
Yeah.
And I know now that my printer will print. Um, I don't know if there's not on this part. Well, you're probably not gonna see them, but yeah, you can't see that. I'm holding up a great thing. Um, these are these are clean out hatches for an electrostatic precipitator that I do. And in the middle of in the very center of here, there are actually two holes for a lift ring that you have to bend and insert yourself. And those holes are like 15 thousandths, and the holes are there.
Yeah.
So
I don't know what the equivalent of that is in the metric side, because I actually converted all of my modeling to metric so that I would know based on, because that's the printers all deal with metric. They're not English based system.
right.
So I just switched to metric for my modeling, which it screws up my architectural work. But
So that's a 0.38 millimeter hole.
perfect. And that's what I tell people is, if you expect less than 0.4 millimeters, your expectations are too high. You can get there, but it takes a quality resin, and you need to know what you're doing. And people get mad at me when I try and help them and realize that you're not going to get a 0.2 millimeter hole. It's not going to happen. But
hold on. I have to speak as SAE. So hold on a minute. Let me. What did you say? Point what? 0.2 millimeter?
yeah,
Oh yeah. Holy cow! That's only a 8 thousandths hole.
yeah, and that's
really
what
tiny.
and that's what people are trying to make their cheap printers do. And I was like, hey, you
But I don't
guys,
know that
you can't get there
if you
unless
can
you get
get
up into the $20,000 printers. It's possible. There's a company called is it my something miniatures. They're doing these incredibly small gameplay miniatures, but
oh
it's
wow.
like a $25,000 resin printer. I was like, yeah, well, I don't need the
Oh
detail
wow.
that bad.
Well, I know you can get 8 thousandths wire, but I mean, I'm not sure I would want to make anything out of it, because 8 thousandths wire, all you'd have to do is breathe on it and it would bend, unless it was like phosphor bronze or stainless steel or something like that.
Well, yeah, and that's I try and it's been difficult in some ways for me to try and get people on the 3D printing for model railroading page to understand you're trying to go too far. I mean, the reality is it's 3.5 millimeters to an inch in HO scale. So that's
Yeah, right.
0.35 millimeters for a 1 inch something, So nobody's going to see the difference between 0.35 and zero point 0.4 at HO scale. Just work with zero point 0.4 and it'll work.
Well, so a number 80 drill bit, I'm trying to think, a number 80 drill bit is 12 thousandths, I think. And you can get smaller drill bits than that, but you'd be hard pressed to not break a drill bit like that trying to use it in a pin vise.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure I have Starrett pin vices, and I'm not even sure I can grip something down that small. Um, Now that you got me wondering, I'm going to take a look, because I don't know. But the one thing I do is I don't expect a production part to be able to print, although it will print. Oh yeah, see, it says this Starrett says that it will grip down to zero, 0 to 40 thousandths for a drill, so, or for the diameter. So maybe they will grip it. By the way, guys, if you don't have a set of Starrett pin vices, um, may I suggest you do get a set of Starrett pin vices?
Yeah, they're next on my list.
You will not have a nicer pin vise in your life. I'm an aircraft fabricator by trade, and so a lot of my stuff that I have here at my hobby desk is that level stuff. But I tried some of the cheaper pin vices for a while, and finally I just broke down, and I think they're like $80, or they used to be $80 for a set of stair pin vices.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I'm going to have something that is like a 12 thousandths wire, although I do draw the hole as 12 thousandths in the drawing, and then I print the part, oftentimes even the alcohol will not wash the resin out of that hole.
Right.
A 15 thousandths hole it will. And I suppose if I use compressed air or something to blow it out, I could do that. But ultimately, what I tell guys to do is when a model has that, like these little clean out hatches, the hole is actually there, but when it prints it prints it out as almost like a little divot, or a dimple rather. And so I tell guys when they get the model, okay, so this is supposed to be for this size wire. This is supposed to be for 15 thousandths wire. Or 12 thousandths wire. You need to use a number 80 drill bit and just clean the hole out.
Yeah.
And, it is modeling, right? I'm not trying to sell someone that's a Franklin Mint die-cast model where all they have to do is put a couple screws in. You're still supposed to be modeling. I don't sell sit and make lift rings. You have to make that stuff yourself. Well,
and it's interesting you're bringing that up. I know that was one of the topics that you said, boy, I wish that one of your goals I know was that, hey, it'd be great if we could talk about how there's a post-processing model building component even with 3D printing. And
don't get me started.
Well, you and I both have watched the models that we've developed go out the door and end up in a modeler's desk, and then they send you pictures and you're like, oh, you do realize you're supposed to get all those little nibs off. They think they're getting a finished model. And I think that some in the hobby that are printing themselves think they're going to get a finished model as well when they pull it off the printer. And you're only getting a finished model everywhere that support doesn't touch.
Yeah. Right. And, you're probably not going to see it. Let me find someone that I think will.
You got to stop printing so small.
Well, no, I got some, here, on this electrostatic precipitator, the light is, yeah, sure. You can see all this, like, funny business going on here.
Yep.
On the base, because this thing prints kind of at an angle like this, right? And so this side faces the build platform.
Right.
And you can see there's like little tits, little raised nubs all over this. And that's what Jason and I are talking about, guys. If you get a 3D part or one of our 3D printed parts, or you get a printer yourself and start printing things, that's what you're going to get. And you have to sit and clean that stuff up. And is it difficult to clean up? No. I mean, if you're building a plastic model from Walthers or whatever, you're going to take the things off the sprues like we've all done. I don't know how old the crowd is that we have watching, but
we're going to assume that they're like late 40s, early 50s like we are.
Yeah, right. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So, when you take a part off a sprue, model airplane or a blast furnace or, the industrial refinery kit, whatever, you're going to have to clean off that little contact point where the sprue from injection molding the piece was touching it.
Right.
And the same is true for the stuff that we're making. It's just got a little contact point on it. And a few minutes with something known as a Riffler File. Grab one out of my treasure trove here. This guy is a Riffler File. I actually sell a set of these in my store that we decided we were going to talk about. But the cool thing about these is this is a file from here all the way to the end.
Yeah.
And it's pointed and it's round. It's I should say it's convex.
Yep.
And the methodology that you use to take a bump off is you kind of use a light pressure and a swirling motion there, and they come off really easily. And I go a step. I mean, I did this electrostatic precipitator. You can kind of see all the little scar marks from the file.
Yep.
And actually, they're not scars. They're just little. They're just little areas where the surface has changed sheen because the rest of it is all just like.
Yeah, you could polish it up and make it the same if you wanted to.
Well, what I do is once I get the Riffler file gone through there, I actually take some like 800 grit wet dry sandpaper
Yeah.
and go out to the kitchen sink and I just stand there and polish that up for a few minutes and it ends up going completely away. The other thing is too that a lot of this stuff that we're making, I mean, I have rail cars that make to sell, but those I print in such a way where the cleanup is minimal.
Yep.
Or the cleanup is on the bottom of the car where you do want to clean it up because you don't want a bumpy surface where the trucks and stuff are. But ultimately you don't have to be like crazy nice with it. And you're able to paint it. A lot of the guys that do the locomotive shells and things like that, they do the same thing. All the printing is the contact points and the structure is on the bottom, the support structures. But something like this thing, it's gonna get painted and you're gonna weather the hell out of it. And I think the same is true for you, right, Jason?
Yep.
People are gonna weather the parts up and they're gonna look like they're used, right?
Correct. There on the refinery side though, there's a lot of pieces that tend to stay a little bit cleaner on the stainless components, but outside of that, you're still going to get discoloration from, the fuel leaks and steam and that kind of stuff. But I got a question for you because you do model very differently than I do, and I have a hunch it's because you trust your printer more than I trust mine. When I do mine, this is all modular, so I don't print this. If I can get it out of the way here, I don't print my stuff in one piece. These are independent pieces. So I'm curious why you don't go that route, so that you could flip and turn like the cone piece on the bottom of the precipitator upside down, so that you don't end up with all those divots. But then you could slide them together. Because all these pieces come apart, and I just don't like printing more than 4 to 6 hours at a stretch. Because I just don't know if something's going to happen. I'd love to think I trust my printers and they've worked great, but I guess I'm kind of anal that way in limiting my exposure of not getting an 8, 10, 12-hour print and then having it fail.
Oh yeah, see, I don't have that. I don't have that concern. I have prints that are. I have a print that is 27 hours or something.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I don't have any qualms about it. If you looked at my print history, matter of fact, Formlabs has contacted me about my print history because I have very few failures.
Yeah.
I don't do that with this thing because I don't know how well you can see it, but there's all these raised areas.
Yeah, I see them.
All over this thing. I mean, this is your high voltage connection, and then on the base here, there are these are recesses for the legs.
Okay.
And that's a clean out hatch, and there just wouldn't be a way to slide the platforms over all of those things and have the platform be close enough to the body.
Gotcha.
Now, if I was to I actually was thinking today maybe I would contact Plano and see how much it would be to get these platforms etched or cut out of stainless, and then then I could make I could just put stops on the model where you would slide the platform down over it, because the real ones I don't know if the platforms actually touched the outside of the precipitator or not.
Right.
But also the bottom, this cone-shaped thing, once you put the legs on it, it literally, the base of this, there's 2 little valves down here that come out the bottom, but they're only like a 1/4 inch long, and the thing is only like another 1/8 of an inch off the concrete that it should be mounted to.
Oh, so you're not even going to see it.
No.
Gotcha.
This other one, this gas washer, the top, the top of the gas washer is separate.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't come up with a way to produce the gas washer in one piece. Actually, the cleanout hatch on the top is separate too. I couldn't.
But Kevin, I think that's good for people to understand that think they're just going to model a complete model, throw it in the printer, and hit print. People really should back up and approach some things from a manufacturing point of view, even though they're not manufacturing it, to understand, hey, this would be better as a separate piece, because then you can control all the variables with where the supports go underneath that you would never see when you build it.
Yeah, well, there's another problem that people don't think about. I don't know about your slicer, but Freeform allows you to detect cupping. And you have to think about cupping, because if you don't, you'll be printing a part and you'll blow out a wall.
Yep.
You know, when the build platform is going up and down in the vat of resin, eventually you'll get an air pocket in there, and you got to remember it's hydraulics, right?
Yeah.
Air compresses to a point. I don't know if the resin can compress, but if the resin acts anything like oil, you can't compress it. I'm sorry. If it acts anything like water, you can't compress it. But for sure, the resin and the air are going to have different compression rates. And if you've got an air pocket in there and you come down on the resin vat and compress the air inside of it enough, it will blow the side out, because people don't realize maybe that when you're printing these parts, they're a solid condition, but they are not solid.
Correct.
The UV, this is all photoreactive resin, and meaning that the laser, and I'm sure your screen is ultraviolet, and that's what's solidifying it, but it's not entirely solidifying it. It's solidifying it to the point where it looks nice and you can get it off the printer, but then it has to go into post-process into either a UV oven, or in the summertime, I like on a day like today when it was like 1,000 degrees outside and it was a bright sunny day, I like actually just taking the stuff out and I put it on my deck and cure it.
Do you use water for your stuff?
Say again?
Do you cure yours in water?
In water? No.
Yeah. I'll have to show you that. It's awesome.
Formlabs, are you talking about like heating it up on the stove? Or?
No. Once I pull a print off, and I go through a whole post-process cleaning of, I use denatured alcohol for my stuff. And then once I let mine completely dry, 24 hours minimum, unless I'm in a rush because I got behind on an order. But I just pulled my, the coker that go the right way. The coker that's in the background, those have been sitting actually for 3 days, because I had my stuff all post-processed, sanded, ready to go, and then a guy ordered a set and I didn't have any extras. So he got a full-blown set of all my coker towers, all sanded and ready. So I finally got another one printed, and I just got to curing them today. But I use it's not a mason jar, but it's like a 4x4 glass jar that you can get at like Hobby Lobby or someplace like that. That it's maybe 4 or 5 inches deep. Put cold water in it, and then drop the prints in. And I usually let them sit. If I'm letting them sit outside, I usually let them sit for about 15 minutes. Then I'll bring them in. They're completely cured, done. And then if I'm using a UV light, I'll usually run, depending on which resin I'm using, because they're all different, somewhere between 5 and 12 minutes. And that's just that's a function of experience. You learn which resins take what amount of time. Because if I cure mine too long, they'll crack. They'll start to. I'll have to find one for another stream. I've got some prints that I use as examples. They actually develop like this crackle facade, like a crackle paint, a random crackle paint. If you cure them too long, the heat that's building up in the cure process overtakes the water, and just from over curing. And that's a function of how thick the resin walls are with stuff, and how hot it is if you're doing it outside. So, but I cure all mine in water, and it's just cold tap water. And and I rarely do I ever cure a model now without putting it in water. And I've had better success with the bigger models not warping and doing anything funky during curing. Because a lot of times what will happen, at least that I've noticed, is when I'm curing and I didn't used to use water, is that UV lamp would discolor the resin because it's getting hot. So there must be something a little bit different with Formlabs resin with the process you use for post-curing potentially.
Yeah, see, with the Formlabs resin, I use Formlabs Gray, and there you use IPA alcohol, and um, the cure time is they recommend is an hour in UV light. They have a curing oven, which I've never purchased. I've always thought about it, but I just never purchased it. But I have actually found that going longer than an hour on something like like this guy, this segmented elbow, an hour is fine. I don't have a set in here. I have these beams, these crane beams that are replacement beams for the Walder's heavy duty overhead crane so that it will fit. I'm not really sure who designed all that stuff. I know it was actually not here. It was most of it was all designed over in Europe.
Yeah.
But their heavy duty overhead crane will not fit in the rolling mill building, which a lot of people they call it a rolling mill building, but really you can kind of use it for any kind of steel mill building that you want to use it for. And they, so I designed these replacement beams that will make the Walder's kit fit in the rolling mill building and ride the craneways that are in there. That's what's weird. The rolling mill has craneways in it, but the crane that they make for it doesn't fit it. So anyway, I drew new
two different designers.
Yeah. So anyway, those beams I cure in direct sunlight almost exclusively because they're really long, and although they are like a regular crane beam where they have a web and then they have end plates, I made them prototype dimensions, and if I try to cure them without, I have an aluminum plate that a fly cut aluminum plate that I put them on, and then I tape them down.
Okay.
In 3 spots on the ends and in the middle, because if I don't, they will actually kind of banana. And I tried a bunch of experiments with. One thing I could do is I could let them sit and go out in about 10 minutes and flip them over and just keep like almost like a rotisserie thing.
Yeah.
Like flipping them over like a steak, and they would be fine. They'd be dead flat. But I'm very proud of the stuff. Just like you, I'm very proud of what I ship to people, and I want them to be like an injection molded plastic part.
Yeah.
And so those. Now I've realized that I can just tape them down and just leave them in the sun, but I leave them out there all day because the gray resin is incredibly stable. But one thing I found out with a set, one of my prototype sets, I don't know how much prototype stuff you print, but I printed out a prototype set and cured them, and they banana, and I'm like, oh crap, So then I figured out the whole flipping thing. But I did them in my oven, in my UV oven, and I came home from work one day, and I have to come out here in the hobby room, and they were ever so slightly bananaed, and I'm like, the hell? I already cured these things. And so now what I do is I go out in the morning and I tape them down to my aluminum plate and I leave them in the sun all day on a crazy hot day. Matter of fact, I've been thinking that maybe I should print a bunch of those off for winter orders while it's still really hot outside and just get a stockpile of them, because in the wintertime I'm not going to have that heat, and I do know that the Formlabs Form Cure oven, or I don't know what to call it. The Form Cure is what they call it. It actually has a heating element in it because if you add heat, it helps the part cure also. So those parts actually, their resin actually likes heat and UV radiation. So
interesting. I didn't know that. I looked into the form printers a while back, and just chose not to go that route. But yeah, a lot of people struggle with getting things to stay flat on the I'll just call them cheap printers. I'm an advocate that you can still make a cheap printer print good, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And a lot of people they're trying to print these big, long, flat surfaces, and then they cure them, and then they banana on you. And I try and explain to people, I said, you need to understand the curing process is just as important as the printing with supports.
Oh yeah.
And understanding it's trial and error to figure out, okay, how large of a long flat piece can I realistically print before it bananas? And I don't even print flat anymore. I print flat. All my brick stuff is flat, obviously, but I leave my supports on when I cure, so that the supports basically become a truss underneath the flat part that I've angled off the build plate. And it keeps my part flat because I don't care what people do to the supports. They're gonna, clip them off with nippers and then they work. They're perfectly fine. But people they're afraid to support up the model, for lack of a better phrase, in an effort to save resin. And I'm like, you're not saving anything by trying to go minimal on supports. You got to do what it takes to print the part.
And normally I break my supports off before I cure the part at all. But I have these bulldozer flats that I produce, and I don't know if you can see this one, but it's got an ever so slight warp in it.
Yeah.
And I mean this car is actually designed on the bottom. It's designed just like a real car, but like you can see my shadow through the deck because the deck is only like 25 thousandths thick because I didn't want to have a crazy thick deck because one of the things I've realized that even with a thick deck, it's not going to stay flat.
Right.
And so, I mean, this has actual I-beam structure underneath of it, like the real car would have in this. It's got a spine and everything. And I haven't released this car yet because, well, for one, I'm working with Laser Kit to do the decking for it.
Gotcha.
It's got a wooden deck on it. And two, I'm going to redesign the spine, and I'm going to have a steel insert made that will go from bolster to bolster, that you'll flip the car over and squeeze some super glue down in there and insert this stainless steel spine in the car and then clamp it together and leave it overnight
so that it stays flat.
The car, but the stainless steel spine should keep the car from doing that.
Yeah.
I figured because it was an I-beam design, I specifically designed it as an I-beam, it wouldn't do that because I did another flat car that I make, and it's a little bit longer. It's a 300-ton flat car, and it did that, and they're cured, but I don't know why they do that. I've actually was gonna talk to Formlabs about it and say, are my dimensions just too thin, or what am I doing wrong here?
Yeah, I mean you're picking up on some stuff that I was kind of hoping that we can continue with in the next stream on Thursday, about kind of the research and development and finding images and then how we go through the design process, because it's not pulling something off a Thingiverse. What you and I do is not taking somebody else's model and modifying it. We are putting the time and energy into finding photographs, drawings, anything we can get our hands on. And some of it is a trial and error, like you're talking about. How thin can we go, even using an I-beam structure, and still maintain a flat car? I got to be honest, Kevin. I haven't dabbled into the flat car any rolling stock yet because I just keep watching everybody else do it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to. I'm just not ready to pour my energy into it yet. It's not that I can't model it. I just like but then I got to deal with what you're talking about, and I selfishly I'd rather guys like you figure it out, and then once people figure it out, okay, I'm gonna print my fleet. I'll be honest with you. I don't think I will ever sell rolling stock 3D printed. That's just not my gig. I'm loving the chemical industry stuff right now because I'm seeing that that's a great niche for me to be in. And then the DPM masonry modular stuff of just the brick stuff and the crazy fitting things that I can plug into those windows that nobody else is doing.
Well, it's
You can have the rolling stock.
I actually don't want to do rolling stock.
It's a pain, isn't it?
I look at it like this, Jason. If I make, like, my son asked me to build a wreck train, and because he wanted to know one day if I had a crane, and I said yes, I have a crane, and
Yeah.
see it. And I pulled it out of the box, and I realized I had started dieselizing and super detailing this Athearn crane 25 years ago, and I just left it and did never touch it again.
Yeah.
And when he asked me what kind of train that would be in, I said it would be in a wreck train usually. He said, "Can we build a wreck train?" Well, of course, because I'm me, I have to go like completely off the reservation and build everything that would be in a wreck train.
Well, yeah,
And
because you can.
we're all nerdy. I mean, I'm surprised none of the guys, if you have a question or a comment you want to like throw out to us, there's a total of 4 people watching, or you've fallen asleep in your chair with a coffee or something.
Yeah, ask questions, guys. I mean, that's why we're here.
Uh, I'm a nerd for, like everybody else in model railroading. I'm a nerd for a lot of different things, and one of the things that I think is really cool are side boom bulldozers. And
Cool.
of course, in a wreck train, you have to have side boom bulldozers. And you know, I don't know that people realize that side boom bulldozer has been around since like at least the 50s.
Yeah.
Probably earlier than that, but in railroad use, certainly in the 50s. And I quickly found these that this company called First Gear made International Harvester TD25 side booms. I don't know why you can see that,
That's nice.
but they're gorgeous. Oh my God, they're gorgeous. They used to sell them in Walters for like $40, and now people will gouge you for like 120. Because it's a die cast, right? Anyway, I found that Union Pacific had these bulldozer flats that they would haul these things around on that were shop built, and OMI Brass makes them, but you'll pay anywhere from if it's got the side boom with it, you're going to pay $1,000 for it. So you got to have 4 of these things. There's no way in hell I'm paying $4,000 for 4 cars.
Yeah.
So I lucked into getting 4 side booms from First Gear. I paid too much money for them, but I have them. And then the UP cars were UP shop built cars. Well, I have my own private road name, so our shop built some too. And I've had a couple people look at them and go, "Oh, could I get one of those?" Well, so now it's another product.
Yeah.
I literally was just making it for me. And I like trying to fill a niche too. I don't necessarily want to sell rolling stock, but like Sheepscot Scale Models sells. Again, it's another nerdy. I like goofball cars. I mean, we don't know each other more than the refinery and the steel mill stuff, but I'm like a nerd for weirdo cars too, and especially equipment.
Yeah.
Meaning like construction equipment or whatever. And Sheepscot Scale Models sells these really, really, really nice photo etched brass pile driver kits. But they don't sell the pile driver part. It's literally just the boom. I don't remember all the names of the pieces, but there's like a boom that comes level straight off of the body of the pile driver. And then there's the pile driver piece that goes up and down. but they don't sell the pile driver. He just recommends either convert an Athearn crane or build your own or whatever. Well, I started doing like a ton of research, like we were just talking about, and they were all of those things were. There were some that were Bucyrus or Erie, built.
Yeah.
Or Brown Hoist. But a lot of them, in the photographs that I found, they all looked like they were just cobbled together out of crap that was in a scrapyard.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I picked one that I thought was pretty cool looking and would probably print pretty well, and I'm going to make the car itself and then the body of the pile driver, which actually was just nothing more than some steam engines and a boiler. It was just a house for that stuff, and then the controls.
Yeah.
But I'm going to make that, and I'm going to put it on my page, and if somebody wants to buy one, I'll sell them one, because I look at it like this, right? We have the opportunity to fill in the gaps where another manufacturer makes something. It's like the guy making the fan housings,
Yeah, exactly.
Fan blades, and they made the grills. He just made the nice fan housing to go with it, and it sells more pile driver kits for Sheepscott, and I maybe sell some pile driver bodies and some trucks,
Well, that's cool.
But I don't want to get into like tank cars and box cars. And I see guys printing that stuff all the time on Facebook, and I'm like, God, you guys are crazy. I could never sit and draw a box car.
There's one guy. I don't know if you know him, Dave. I think his last name is pronounced Wetterstrom. He is the only guy that I've seen, and he's on the 3D Printing a Mile Railroad page, who's doing a very, very good job with passenger style cars.
The passenger car guys are printing some really awesome
stuff. There's some more guys getting plugged in, but he's really, I forget the printer he's using. He may be using a Mono X, but it's a larger format printer. But he's doing a really good job. So I mean, I've become friends with him, and I follow his stuff. And he's not posted anything for a while, but he doesn't want to get into the production side of it because it's not easy. I mean, it's those long, flat car sides with window openings that it's just tough to print. It's not that you can't do it, but you're like, man, if I'm going to go into production mode, it's got to be something that I can reliably get out the door at a high quality. Because I'm just like you. I mean, our name goes on these things that I don't ever want anybody to not get something that's a high quality model. That even they have to do some cleanup, but that's part of it. But I just don't see very many guys doing that with the passenger cars, as well as Dave's doing it. There's a couple that are starting to get into it, but cars are just tough.
Well, so there was I'm one of the things I don't know about you, but one of the things I love to do, or maybe one of the guys that's watching can comment, I love finding the out of the way hobby shop that was a guy was running out of like a little store in a little town or something like that, and the hobby shop is still there because it's his thing and he's retired, but it's like a time capsule. Like you can go in there and there's Athearn blue box cars that are still
he got stuff from 40 years ago in there still.
Yeah, I love those hobby shops because as a modeler, I love buying detail parts, and I like buying cars that I have to put together. And it's model railroading, right? You're supposed to be a modeler. And so, but there's been like this no man's land, right? That I would, in my mind, it's like all the shops are burnt down and they're just foundations. It's like post-apocalyptic or something that we've had to walk through because it was either you go to order something from Grant Line and they're gone.
Yeah.
Or you go to order something from, hell, Eddie Moore Details Associates, and you might get what is still in the catalog, but maybe they're not producing it anymore.
Yeah.
And so finding all these little detail parts has been a royal pain in the neck. And you know, I have a good friend that's a circus modeler, and um, the gentleman that owns Circus City Decals is actually producing a lot of circus stuff with his 3D printer.
Oh,
And
really?
he's also an iron ore modeler, and he's building an ore carrier, a lakes boat, and he actually, I could not believe this. He printed the entire pilot house and the entire engine house in one piece. So the
Oh,
stanchions, the hand railings, everything.
I know who you're
And I'm
talking
like,
about. I can't think of his name.
oh my god, do you have like a $30,000 printer that's the size of a filing cabinet?
He's an
I'm like,
N scaler,
how are you
right?
printing? Yeah, I'm like, how are you printing? Um, no, I think he's an HO. But I was like, how are you printing all those hand railings and everything? And I mean, I know how fragile that stuff is. And he was posting pictures of it, and it was beautiful, you know.
And
But
he's
um,
printing his handrails without intermediate supports. I know who you're
yeah,
talking about because we've chat. He's hit me up on my Facebook page. We've chatted back and forth because he asked me a while back, "Hey, do you need somebody to do modeling for you? Actually, digital modeling." I was like, I have that under control right now. But I asked him, I said, I just need to know how you're doing your handrails. Crickets. He wouldn't tell me. Because I'm like, how on earth is
well, it's
this
got to
guy?
be the angle that he's printing them at, but still.
Yeah. But I've seen his models and I'm like, I love the hand railing component without having supports. I, I don't mind it because I've gotten used to it with how I model my stuff now. It's just part of my process. I mean, I remove all the supports on the models that I kick out that are the column tower type models. So
Mhm.
90% of those supports are removed before I ship them out and they're bubble wrapped and stuff. But I'm like,
Yeah.
here I go again. I got to set aside 2 hours of my day to exacto off all the supports around all the railings because if I leave it to somebody else, I'm like, they're going to break the railings and then it's going to be a hurdle. And I like to make sure they get quality stuff. But his stuff, I know who you're talking about. I can't believe I can't remember his name. I think it's Tim. Does that ring a
Yeah.
bell?
Yeah, I think it's him.
And he's a great modeler, but he won't tell
Yeah.
me how he does his handrails.
It's a proprietary secret.
Yeah, but
See,
yeah, he's doing a bunch of
I don't
ore
do hand
stuff.
railings. I don't print hand railings on purpose. Um, I want people to model.
Yeah.
And Musser Rail, is that James? James Musser, is that you or different Musser? Um, so I don't print hand railings on purpose because I want people to model. Um, there are two ways. Well, there's one way of doing. There's probably two ways of doing hand railings on steel mill models. Guys will use 30,000 by 30,000 strip, and they'll cut hand railing stanchions, and then you glue all the hand railing stanchions on,
Right.
make sure they're all straight up and down and everything. And then you let that dry, and then you come back with 20 thousandths, um, 30 thousandths by 20 thousandths strip, and you make the actual hand railings. And there are hand railings that look like that on built. Um, I have experimented with using um, 10 thousandths by 20 thousandths strip, and it does work. But also, uh, the you can buy hand railings stock. You know, both Plano or not Plano, Plastruct and Don Tichy have hand railing stock that you can use.
Yes.
But then you got to make a joint, you know, and they look really nice. He makes strap and he makes round bar hand railings, and they're very fragile, but they're beautiful when you get them done. Um, but the thing that I like to use, and I'm actually going to talk to Don about making a different style stanchion, but he makes Pennsylvania Railroad um, platform stanchions, and you use the top railing as the 20 thousandths piece of wire, and the middle railing at 15 thousandths piece of wire,
I know exactly what you're
and
talking about. Yeah.
and they go in with a little pin.
Yep.
They have a little pin in the bottom. You drill a hole, So if you look at my platforms, they have a little divot where you drill that out, and that's where your PRR style stanchion goes. Now, the bad thing about those stanchions is that they're a hairpin stanchion, meaning that they're like a little A-frame.
Yeah.
And they do have like a little they do have an edge on them where they go on the edge of a platform like that. But what I do is I cut off the leg. There's a little flat leg that I cut off that goes to the inside because I think that way it looks a little bit more like something to be on the edge of a
have you talked with Don, I mean, somewhat recently? I mean, do you communicate with him regularly? I mean, I just order stuff from him. I haven't emailed him for probably a couple months.
I don't know that I think I've emailed him once this year, but he's very responsive to that stuff.
Yeah, he's.
I emailed him. I assume a bunch of other guys emailed him too when Grant Line went under, because I went and pilfered every cable sheaves I could get my hands on, because my ground control valves all use Grant Line cable sheaves.
Okay.
And I emailed him and I said, hey, these guys are out of business. This other place in Arizona or wherever that has picked them up keeps promising to sell their stuff, but it's never for sale on their website. It's been like 2 or 3 years now, and I sent him an email. I was like, if you make these cable sheaves, I'll buy them from you by the gross.
Yeah.
And not long after, he must have had other people messaging him about windows and other things that Grant Line made, because he came out with a bunch of things that were blatant copies of Grant Line stuff. Of course, I think the injection molding is much better than Grant Line's.
Yeah.
But I was going to email him and just say, hey, look, the steel mill guys and actually binary guys and any models, any kind of loading dock or anything, we could really use a hand railing stanchion that took 20 thousandths and 15 thousandths wire, made out of something like engineering plastic, or like the old Detail Associates MU hoses were made out of. You could glue them, but they were really resilient, or robust, I should say. That may have a little pin, but it would go on more like a locomotive stanchion where you could drill into the side of the platform,
right,
and then mount it in there. Because I did some. I bought some Tichy steel water tanks. I'm looking at the boxes now. The number 7012 tanks for my Coke batteries, and they typically, if they had valves or whatever on top of they have a hand railing stanchion that will go around the sides. So I measured them all out and drilled them all for pins and the Pensy platform stanchions on there with the wire and everything. And I took them over, and the guys were, holy crap, those brass?
Yeah.
I'd already painted them.
Yeah.
I was like, no, they're not brass, they're plastic. The wire is brass, but they turned out fantastic.
Yeah.
I just took the old knife handle deal where you run it along the wire to put a curve in it. But I'm going to ask him if he would make those, because a lot of the steel mill platforms, I've seen them with strap style hand railings on them, but a lot of them are the round bar or the pipe style also.
Well, and
the pipe just looks better.
I order stuff from him. I don't know where I'm at compared to other guys, but fairly regularly. Several $100s at a time. So if you reach out to him, just tell him. I mean, Jason with Focus, I'll buy some too. I need them for what I do. But hey, Bob threw up a question here real quick that I think both you and I can address. He's asking, selling does raise the bar, but do you find in-depth knowledge of an industry, every part's name and function, is necessary to model it well, or is a good eye for detail and CAD printing know-how sufficient? You and I probably approach this, well, no, you're a fabricator, so you've got an eye for detail. Bob, I'll say as an architect, experience in and of itself in doing architectural detailing gives me a huge advantage. I mean, I know it does, because I can look at things and I understand how parts and pieces go together for a product that I don't have in-depth knowledge of. I'll just say I have zero in-depth knowledge of the chemical refinery industry, but because I've reviewed so many plans for 20 plus years and I know about the petroleum industry, I know how all these parts and pieces go together. I can get through the resourcing, research and development and design if I can find a few drawings and hammer out most of what I'm doing without having that in-depth knowledge. I imagine, Kevin, you're probably the same way.
Well, I actually, it's actually interesting to me that James Musser is on with us because when I started, steel modeling, I was looking around the internet for sources of inspiration and people that had already built things, and I'm the type of person where I can look at something, and my mind kind of takes like a snap photo of it, and I can kind of dissect it in my head and figure out, okay, I need these shapes to make that, or I need this equipment, this electrical connectors or whatever to make this stuff. And so when I found James's page, his blog page, which James, if you could, would you please start modeling again because I love watching modeling blogs. Um, his pages were crazy in depth on how the things were built. Some of it was how the things worked, and I could tell that he was very much the same kind of person I am. If I'm going to make something, when I started building my Coke Works, I got the Bible out, the U.S. Steel book.
Yeah.
The Making, Shaping, and Treating of Steel. And I just read and looked at the diagrams, flow charts in there, and the diagrams. Some of those books have flow charts, and some have actually illustrated diagrams of how things work, or what's piped together, or what goes where. And reading Dean Freitag's books and other books, and talking to other modelers and guys that mills and stuff. And I actually like learning how all the stuff works because I'm from a farm town, and having lived in the city for 20 years now, or in a city, I live near Chicago.
Yeah.
And I like knowing where things come from and how they're made. And I know where milk comes from and how butter's made. And I see people standing in front of milk counters here in the city protesting the death of cows because these cows didn't have to die so you could have milk. Yeah, it's painful. So I'm like the opposite of those people. I really like learning about how everything goes together. So I suppose in answer to Bob's question, in order to, in steel mill modeling, and I would assume almost in any kind of industrial modeling, the one thing that differentiates, in my mind, the thing that differentiates a steel mill section of a layout or a module or whatever, and a guy modeling a grain elevator. The guy modeling the grain elevator is probably going to build the kit, paint it gray, maybe weather it, and put it on his layout.
Correct.
But he's not going to put all the electrical boxes and the pipes and air compressed air lines and kind of grasping at straws there because I'm not a grain modeler. But if you go see one of those places, they're covered in pipes and wires and conduit and things like that.
Yep.
And the steel mill guys are going to go after them. And although you could use the Dean Freitag method, just put a bunch of pipes on it, make it look like you knew what you were doing, and it'll awe anybody. I think there are a measure of modelers that want to go, well, that's the main steam feed line to the to the turbines in the blowing engine house, and that's the return line, and that's why it's smaller because the steam is it's expanded and now it's got some condensation in it, so you don't need as big of a line, or vice versa, or wherever. I think that's the thing one of the things that appeals to me in modeling steel mills is that steel mills grow organically. They're almost like a farm of weeds, and they only have so much of a footprint for the mill, and so they really design things to go in a very small area, or the footprint that they have where they haven't already built something, or they repurpose things.
Right.
I've got this I've got this fantastic photo that goes down the side of a boiler house in a mill, and the thing I like about it the most isn't the boiler house. It's that there are pipe racks hung on the side of the building and on the side of other things, where they've run piping, and
Yep.
then where there wasn't piping on the pipe racks, there's these. There must be like 30 cables for electricity, I'm guessing, that are just like draped from one pipe rack to the next. And then there's like off the side of the pipe racks, there are wooden beams with insulators on them where they have strung, I don't know, telephone wires or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys really just like, if the building is there, there's a building down in Burns Harbor. It used to be a rolling mill, I guess. And this building is like almost a mile long. And the building itself is gone, but the main roof beams and columns, every, I don't know how far they are, every 100 feet or something, are still there, even though they've scrapped the rest of the building.
Everything else,
because of all the crap that they hung on the outside of the building, they can't really put it anywhere else.
That's awesome.
They cut the building away from the columns and main beams and left those all in place. So it's like this whale skeleton in this mill, because they hung all these pipe rafts and everything off the side of the building originally with pipes and electrical wires and everything else. And I think, that's a long-winded answer to Bob's question, but you can either just like throw a couple bags of evergreen styrene tubing at the side of a building and call it all these pipes, but it's also kind of fun to say, okay, well, these two pipes are steam, and this couple of pipes are cooling water, and blah 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 blah.
Yep.
And then all these cables run here, whatever. The thing about adding all of those things into your steel mill is that instead of just a confluence of buildings on a part of your layout, someone will look at it not as a bunch of buildings, but as one industry, because all the buildings are tied together with pipes and electrical conduits and things like that.
And this is the hurdle that I'm up against, not actually knowing as much as I will 6 months from now, a year from now in the chemical industry, is because I'm an attention to detail kind of person. The piping piece for me is huge. And I'm jacking around with this silly little learning kit from Dynamic Preservation Models, and it's not good enough for me just to throw a piece of cardstock on the top of the building, because it's my retrofitted fire pump building for the refinery. And so I've designed in the racks and the supports and everything that sit up on the roof, and I'm trying to figure out how to run the pipes across the roof so that when a modeler comes and looks at it, they can appreciate the attention to detail that, hey, this guy didn't just throw this kit together. He's thought about where the water line comes into the fire pump house, how it exits the fire pump house and gets up onto the pipe racks, how it interacts with the steam lines, and there's probably a random petroleum line of some kind running across there because it's a retrofit building. But at the same time, those are the things that freeze me, because I get caught up in trying to find information online about what's the typical pattern that piping runs in a chemical industry. And there's nothing out there for us modelers. There's tons of information out there in the real world, but man, trying to dissect it, it's like you can see behind me, I've got all the steel pipe racks done, but I don't know what piping's going in them yet because I haven't quite figured that part out. So I am very much in tune with trying to know what pipes are and not just randomly run styrene. Because you're right, a lot of guys do that, and the model looks good, but then there's the modelers that go to the next level, that every connection from every, bolted, connection and gate valve all has its very specific purpose, just like the prototype. Now, I'll admit, I think you guys in the steel industry you're way better collectively as a modeling group, than what I found on the refinery side. There's a couple of guys doing some great refinery models, but as a whole, there's just not near the community that you guys have to help facilitate the research side of why certain pieces go with certain things. I mean, you guys have a plethora of resources just on the modeling page without even going online to try and do it yourself.
You know, part of that could be that the steel mill stuff has been, I mean, of course, people have modeled refineries since the 50s or whatever for model railroading, but the people think Dean Freitag is actually the father of steel mill modeling in HO or steel mill modeling in general. And from what I have learned, I've actually seen two pictures of it. There was some guy that built a blast furnace out of brass in the early 50s, and Dean either knew him or he saw photos of it, and that started the bug for him.
Gotcha.
He certainly is the father of promoting building steel mills in scale. But there are the guys that are happy with just building the Walters kit and having it on the layout, and that's good enough.
Right.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think the steel mill guys are probably further down the road, so to speak. We're all in the same path modeling, but we're further down the road than the refinery guys, just because of Dean.
Okay.
I mean, he promoted modeling steel mills in the magazines and in model railroader and stuff for years, and everybody knew him.
Yeah.
I would not doubt that Plastruck just gave him stuff because he wrote so many articles. And he also built things for other people. And, with Facebook, I don't know when Donald started the steel mill modeling page on Facebook, but I do know that I have always kind of guessed. I've actually talked to Donald a couple times about this. I think probably a quarter to maybe a third of the people that are on that page are actually modelers, and the rest of them are either enthusiasts or former. And then the last category, the guy could actually be in all three or stay in the former steel mill employee. And I think the guys that work at steel mills just think they're cool.
Yeah.
And so you have a chance that at least a third to a half of the guys on there are former mill employees, and of that number, they could comprise a portion of the other two categories that I listed as well. But the thing that makes that nice is that I've gotten on there and asked a question. I asked one time, I had a customer that wanted to know how many platform lamps to buy from me for a blast furnace, and where did they go? And I said, I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
So I posed it on the page, and within an hour, a guy got back to me that he not only knew where they all went, he was an electrician that his job in the plant was to replace light fixtures and light bulbs for like 20 years, and he knew where they all went. If I would send him a diagram, he would illustrate on the diagram where all the lamps went, where they typically would go.
Yeah.
And so people hate Facebook. I don't want to get on Facebook. I don't want to get caught up in the politics. It'll steal my soul. Whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but the thing you're missing out on, Facebook is just like television.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can the originator of television wanted a way to educate the public. He thought he could change the world by the public having access to the knowledge of man on television. And Facebook can be treated the same. I'm in I don't even know how many groups I'm in. I'm in a lot of groups.
Too many.
They're like a Wanna page and Lehigh Bethlehem Steel page, and the Steel Modeling page, and the Ore Modelers page, and on and on and on and on. And if you wanted to get on Facebook and just be in the groups, it's a crazy good resource. I mean, think about it. 30 years ago, if you wanted to know where the light bulb went, the lamps that went on platforms of a blast furnace, you either had to know somebody that worked in the plant that would tell you that, or you had to go there and maybe sit outside in the evening and count them all, binoculars or something, I don't know, whatever. And I did it in an hour while I was at work. You know,
Yeah.
I took 5 minutes and posted the question, and an hour later there was a, you know, and so the refinery guys, I've looked at the refinery stuff because before you came along, and you know, there was the one Facebook refinery page, and there wasn't very many members on it. These guys all pipes and stuff too. I don't want to get into making all the things like you make, but certainly my all my pipe fittings, my elbows and stuff would sell.
They're all applicable. Absolutely.
I don't know that I've sold any to any refinery modelers because I don't advertise heavily on them. Especially now that you've got your site.
Well, I'll have to push them over.
Best not to step on someone's toes.
Yeah, but to be honest, Kevin, I'm probably not gonna. I've got so many models that I need to do that the pipe fittings beyond what I've already done don't make sense for me to continue to push. I'll link everybody up over to yours because honestly, it's just at some point you have to pick what you're good at, and this is a hobby still for me. This is not like, I mean, unless you're doing something that I don't know about, I'm not getting rich doing this. You know, it covers my hobby expenses, makes things fun, gets people a product that they can't get from a big manufacturer because nobody's doing it. It's custom, and it keeps it enjoyable.
My goal has never been to make. I mean, I fund my hobby with it.
Yeah.
But that literally pretty much means I can go buy some detail parts, and you know, I pay my club dues with it. I maybe buy a locomotive now and then. It has certainly funded my ultimate hobby desk my entire life. But ultimately, my goal was never to make a living off of doing this.
Yeah.
I really genuinely wanted to help people because once I realized that I could make really cool stuff and I could sell it to guys, and then they could have the cool stuff, or they could just have time savers. You know, I just made these goggle valves, and they're like they're a slip over kind of affair. These ones aren't. These are for my electrostatic precipitator kit, but
right.
I have a slip over version that will just slip over tubing. You know, I don't want to sit and make these, and I don't want to sell them for so much money that a guy can't afford them.
Right.
You know, they're supposed to be a time-saving device because we're kind of back to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about your time versus the money spent on the parts.
Right.
My time is more valuable. I have a little boy that I love spending time with, and at night I like to model for an hour or so. And I don't do that every night, but my time is more valuable to me than $2.50 for a fan housing that looks fantastic that some other guy already made.
Exactly.
Fabricators are lazy, right? Fabricators are lazy fabricators. Why make it yourself if you don't have to?
Yeah.
And we can do such cool things. I mean, you're an architect and I'm a fabricator. I'm a military aircraft fabricator by trade.
Cool.
And I have been making things. I'm from a poor family, so if we wanted ships to run in the creek and have a war with, we had to build them out of 2x4s and gray paint and nails. And, you know, so I grew up being as creative as I could to get the things that I wanted. And you know, it just kind of led me down the merry path of, you know, building race cars and stuff like that as a profession.
Yeah.
And you're an architect, and you got there somehow too. And the guy with a free version of Fusion 360 could learn to use it and design the things that we designed to sell. Some very fast, and some would take years to do that.
Yep.
But ultimately, I try to keep the price point at a level where a guy can afford to buy the things that would make his model look nicer or allow him to put all those pipes on there.
Right.
I honestly don't think any of um, my my pipe fittings and stuff are overly expensive. And
No, that's
once
why,
you put them together,
Kevin. That's why I'm
once
not
you put
doing it because you already have them at the price point that I would probably put them at if I did it. They're very
Yeah, I
reasonable.
mean, it's again it's like the guy doing the fan housing Plano parts. You've got this fantastic refinery stuff that I would totally push someone to if they asked me if I sold anything for refineries. I'd be like, no, I sell steel mill
Yeah.
stuff. You can, or just heavy. A lot of the stuff I call it heavy industrial stuff because it really is getting
Yeah.
valves and pipes and stuff like that. But I've the thing that I really like to hear is that I've had guys order a bunch of pipe fittings and flange rings and some goggle valves or gate valves or whatever from me, and they'll get the stuff in the mail and they'll say that it's nice and everything. And I always ask them, "Would you send me photos of whatever you're building?" And they'll come back and send me photos of all these pipes that they put together, and they're like, it took me longer to cut the evergreens tubing to the right length than it did to actually assemble all of this stuff, and it looks fantastic, and that's exactly what I want to
Yep.
happen. It's not feeding my ego, and it's not feeding my bank account. What it is feeding is my happiness, and that a guy that may not, like me, has a family or whatever, just doesn't have a lot of time. Um, he bought a bunch of pipe fittings or whatever else from me, and accomplished in an evening what would have taken him, a week of evenings to do with plastruck stuff
Yep.
or sitting down and trying to cut all the pieces out himself or whatever. And I haven't known you for that long, but I kind of feel like you're probably in the same boat there.
Exactly. I don't think our paths, although they traveled differently in parts of the U.S. I mean, you're a military guy. You Army?
I was in the Army for 2 years, and I was in the Air Force for 16 and a half years.
Yeah. See, I'm a Navy guy, and I come from a
I won't hold
military
that against
family.
you.
Well, I won't hold the Army against you. I mean, I'm from a military family, and I didn't have everything given to me when I was a kid either. And I've always had a passion for architecture, so the creative side of me has always been something that's fueled my passion that's led to where I'm at today. And so I won't talk about cars too much because then we'll get way sidetracked. I'll just say I have a 1976 Corvette that I
That's
love.
okay. I won't hold that against you either.
I love pouring a little bit of time into and having fun with. But yeah, I mean, I think
Well,
it's important for people, and this is why I was excited about finally getting in touch with you several weeks ago, however long it's been now, about trying to really educate people that, I mean, if you're in it for the money, you're in it for the money. I mean, that's fine.
sure.
I mean, there's plenty of people that want to do that. But there are a group of modelers, I think, like us, that are in it for the development and the forwarding of better quality models in the industries that we just happen to pursue. In
Yeah, I
getting,
mean,
go ahead.
I kind of see us, and I'm not trying to be egotistical here or anything like that. I kind of see us as the detail associates and grant line of today because those guys, they either got
Yeah,
old and didn't want to do it anymore. I mean, that's the grant line guy. He retired, and I think, and somebody else bought the business, but they haven't done anything with it. But because of the 3D printers, guys like you and I, Scott and Tim, and there's guys I don't know of. This
yeah,
guy that I just met, his name eludes me. Um, the diesel detail parts. Um, we're able to become that new generation of people providing detail parts to the masses that allow them to do nicer models. I mean,
right.
I don't think that the steel mill modeling page on Facebook has. I think it has almost 3,000 members. I
Yeah,
haven't looked lately, but I'm pretty sure it has almost 3,000 members. And I don't think that would have happened obviously you need the Walters kits because guys just don't want to build. I don't think they want to scratch build a blast furnace, and everybody wants a blast furnace because they're huge.
Right.
But they get the kit out of the box, and it's cool. It's all the right shapes, but they are also, I think, they are also a generation of modelers, and I don't know generation, just mean the current generation. I think they're also the current generation of model railroaders that are used to brass engine level detailed plastic engines that they're buying from Athearn and Trains and those guys. And the same with the rail car. I would never in wildest dreams could I force myself to buy a $50 boxcar. It's never going to happen. But there are guys who spend $1,500 on one boxcar.
Yeah.
It's insane. And so they like that level of detail, and I think getting the Walters kits out of the boxes and realizing that there is no blowing engine house and they need one, and that the shapes are all there and the building is there, but the little details aren't there. I think the same probably is true of the Walters refinery kit. I'm not a refinery guy, but I have put one of those together, and I thought, wow, it just seems like it's missing. You buy stuff, you drive by one of those refineries, and there's like a crazy amount of things other than just pipes.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second, and I'm going to let you get going, Mustard. We'll get to your question in a second because that's a great one.
Yeah.
We won't ignore you, but Kevin, keep going.
No, I'm just saying. I think that they get this thing out of the box and put it together, and they're like, wow, this thing is lacking in detail. I want to put detail on it. And I think you and I and Scott and Tim and guys I don't know about.
Yeah.
Because I'm focused on my products. I think we're filling in those gaps and allowing those guys to do super detailing. They love super detailing. I mean, if you go on James Mustard, since he's on here, I'll just throw him under the bus. If you go on his blog page and look at the photos of the things that he has built for his mill, they're insane. I mean, I'm like, how did you build this? And it was a huge inspiration to me. My primary cooler is directly based off of what I saw him build.
Yeah.
I was inspired by it. And I did a little more research, and I mean, he provided me with photos. He was super nice about it. And I mean, it's a great. I entered it at the Steelman Modelers meet as a contest model, and I spent way too much time on it detailing it. But I think guys just want to buy detail parts, and they want to make their stuff look nice.
Yeah.
And I think the 3D printers, the desktop 3D printers, have allowed us to fill those gaps in. And yes, James, I draw in Fusion 360. I draw everything in HO scale. I don't know. I would not draw although you could draw something to prototype scale. I don't. I draw it in HO scale because the thing about drawing something, I mean, I don't want to hog all the time here, James.
I don't use 360, so I'll talk about what I use after you're done.
I draw in scale specifically because if I drew it in real light or in 1:1 scale, prototype size, I would draw things on it that are on the real one that would not print.
Right.
Or they would print so small it'd be a waste of my time to draw them.
Yep.
I mean, if you look at my stuff, even on this incredibly tiny clean out hatch that I showed earlier, if you look at that in scale, there are actually washers and bolt heads on the cover plate.
Yeah.
And if you looked at it with a magnifying glass, you would see those because the printer prints that detail. But I also know how big to draw that stuff so that it will print if someone ever got close enough to it to look at it.
Yeah.
But there are other things that just get lost in the print that are not worth drawing. So
yeah, I agree 100%. And I jumped into 360 2 or 3 years ago, and because I wanted to know it, And so I know enough about 360, but I'm not proficient in it. I've been using SketchUp Pro since the day it came out in 2001, 2002, however long it's been. So I know the advantages 360 offers with the parametric modeling, but because I've become so proficient with SketchUp and I know what I can do with organic modeling.
SketchUp?
What's that?
You draw in SketchUp?
Oh, dude, I draw everything in SketchUp.
Wow, you're like a SketchUp god. I tried using that and I just couldn't wrap my head around.
Well, and I think that's the hurdle, is that because I've used it so long, it's loaded with a whole bunch of add-ons and things because I use the pro version. That's my industry.
Yeah, right.
That it doesn't take anything for me to drop a rivet on and spin it around a round model in less than 2 minutes, kind of thing. I mean, it's a tips and tricks kind of thing. But I'm with you 100%. I model at HO scale because I know what the limitations are with the 3D printing piece in that 0.4 millimeter tolerance that the printers are capable of. That if I was to model at full scale, like you've said, you're going to do handrails at 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 1.5 inch, whatever it is. Those things just sometimes aren't going to print. And that's what causes a lot of people problems that model at full scale. They've not done the math for the conversion down to 1:87 or even beyond that. And then they're like, well, how come my handrails don't print? Well, because you drew 1 inch handrails and they're just not going to print because that's less than 0.3 millimeters. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, because once you take that 1 inch down to the HO scale, it's 87 times smaller. So you're trying to print something that's 8 thousandths in diameter.
Yeah, and then people get mad at you when you try and help them and tell them that it's not really possible. Well, but I have a resin printer. I can't help you anymore. And what I've started to tell people to do, I said, you just need to go spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes going and looking at what the tolerances for your printer are and set realistic expectations. And I think part of that is when you model at like HO scale, I think it gets us in a detail perspective when we're working through that model, knowing that we can only really take things down to a certain level before they won't print. And you're like, yeah, not dealing with that reveal or that nut and bolt because it's, so small. You're not going to see it from 2 feet away. But
no, and I have guys, because I sell things in N, HO, S, and O.
Yeah.
I have guys that ask me for things. Hey, you don't have this. You have this listed on your site in HO and S, but you don't have it listed in N. Why is that? Can you make it an N? And I'll be like, no, I can't, because it's not going to print.
Well, but why not?
Yeah. It'll be a failed print.
Yeah.
Because the wall thickness. I know how to alter the models when I scale them to N. To thicken the right things up to make them print.
Right.
But there are other things like that I would probably just redraw an N and detail off.
Right.
Rather than waste the printer's time, if that makes any sense. On the Ascension columns for Cook Battery, there are these little guides for the explosion door thing on the top of it. I think it's an explosion door.
Yeah.
Or it's a clean out hatch or something. Actually, I think it's some kind of valve, and there's a lever that goes over the side of it, and there are little guides for the valve arm. And in HO, they print great, but in N, I guarantee they wouldn't even be there.
Right.
They're already only 25 thousandths thick by like 30 thousandths wide or 40 thousandths wide in HO. And then there are other things that guys will ask me for in O, and I'll say no.
Too big.
It's I can't make the item. I mean, O gauge guys are kind of crazy people anyway, because I mean, it is, I mean, I've looked at prices on some of the stuff, and it's just like insanely expensive.
It's crazy.
But like the cost to print, I had a guy ask me for stoves one time in O, and
wow.
And my stove kits they're essentially $100 a piece.
Yeah.
they're if I sell them single and then I sell a 3 stove set because a lot of guys buy a 3 stove set to refit the Athearn mop. And he wanted 4 stoves, and a stove by itself is around $100.
Yeah.
And I had said, okay, so you're going to use PVC for the stove body, and I think it came out to be 4 or 5 inch.
Yeah, it's going to be huge at O scale.
Oh my God, they're gigantic. Because they're 12 inches. The body is 12 inches tall in HO, so they're 2 feet tall in O.
Yeah.
But I figured out that for the so you can get 4 stoves with the bodies from $400 or something like that. But in O scale, without sending the PVC, because PVC, that's ridiculous. Go to your local
exactly
store and buy a length of it for $20.
I'm not paying to ship PVC.
I don't know how much it is now, but there's just the parts, the hot and cold blast valves, the stove tops, and the burners were, I don't know, something like $1,500.
Yeah, in O scale. Yeah.
In O. I
yep.
mean,
and he probably had a cow.
No, he didn't. He said, "Yeah, I figured." Because I said, "This is going to be crazy expensive. I'll scale it all up, but I want you to know it's going to be a while. I'm not just going to scale it up and send it to you, because the opposite is true of going to N in O. O is big enough where you could actually probably see threads on the bolts.
Yeah,
that were sticking out of the other side, and I would want stuff, because if you're buying something from me and it's going to be gigantic." I want people to look at it and go, "Holy shit, that's really nice."
Yeah, it's a showcase piece.
Yeah. So I mean, I started thinking about the time that it would take to add all the bolts, the threaded section that you would see sticking out, and all the other details. Like, I mean, you could probably actually, those bolts are gigantic. You could probably actually see the grade 8 marking on the top of the bolts and stuff like that. And, I'm a nerd. I would want to add all the shit.
Well, once you add it, it's easy to print it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
right. But I mean, it was without doing anything to them, adding any detail at all. It's like $1,500. So I just, there's a bunch of stuff that I will sell. I had a guy in Australia order a BOF charging box from me.
Yeah.
I had to split it in half. I had to make locking lugs for gluing it together, because it was so huge I couldn't print it in one piece. And then when the order got there, it took like 3 months to get to Australia, because he ordered it during COVID.
Yeah.
But he got it there, and he sent me a message. He goes, "This thing is gigantic." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is it to scale?" And I said, "Yeah. It's off of prints." And he goes, "Oh, I should have ordered the S scale ones." And I was like, "Why?"
Why?
He goes, "Because I built my BOF in S scale, because the O scale one was too big for my train room."
That's
I felt
people.
bad for the guy. He had this like $300 charging box, and he can't use it because it's so bad. I was like, glue it together and use it for a flour scoop in the kitchen or something.
Well, hey Kevin, we're actually at 2 hours, which is the problem we had last time. We can just keep going on and on and on, but I want to save some content for next time on Thursday. Are you good with covering the research and development, the process we go through, and finding material online and how we design stuff, and maybe focusing that thread Thursday for the live stream on kind of those topics? Does that work for you?
Yeah, it works for me. I mean, we've got an audience of 400, so if they're all okay with that too, I think it's good. I mean, research is such a huge part of model railroading anyway.
Right.
Good. A quick answer to James, HO scale. So HO scale in metric.
Yeah, that I do model that way. It's 3.5 millimeters per foot. It's basically 0.3 millimeters equals to 1 inch.
I wonder if he's asking that because because of your comment, and I don't know if people don't realize that most of the modern CAD world is in metric.
Correct.
You can switch over to inch. I draw in standard measuring system because we went to the moon with standard, so that's what I used.
Well, yeah,
That's
and
my crappy answer, and I'm sticking to it.
well, and the only thing that
still working in, but
Kevin, the only thing I do in metric is HO scale model railroading. I mean, I'm a U.S. based architect. Everything we do is in feet and inches.
yeah,
So, I mean, I still model everything I'm doing from the professional design side in SketchUp with feet and inches. I switched to the HO metric stuff because everything related to the printing side was all metric. And so I was just like, I just need to figure out what does each one of these increments mean? What are my tolerances? And that's where I'm like, okay, 1.5 inches is basically 0.4 millimeters. And so that's the thinnest thing I can really do, which is perfect because if I can figure out how to do the railings that guy's doing at 0.4 millimeters, that would be awesome. But I even do my railings. I think my railings are 0.6 is how they end up working out.
Oh, he says he's asking because cheap printers use metric.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the reasons is because the equipment side, and I don't know about form, everything is in a metric system. So it was just easier.
Form I can do. I do everything in inch. It asks, the slicer asks you if you want to use inches or metric. And it's funny because I've had people, I do printing for people as well.
Yeah.
And they'll send me something and it will be in metric. And when I send it into, or no, I'm sorry, it'll be in inches. And I don't know what CAD program they used, but the DXF will come through in inches. And when I send it to the printer, it will be microscopic and ask me if I want to use inches because the slicer has interpreted everything in metric.
Right.
And so 3 inches becomes 3 millimeters. And then it will just ask me to use inch. I'll say yes, part is instantly the size that it's supposed to be. But I draw everything in inches in Fusion. You can set Fusion to standard or metric measuring system.
Yeah, and Bob, I'm seeing what you're typing with the STL component. Here's the only hurdle that I have, and it comes back to what scale you're modeling in. It will export the units the slicer wants to see. It's when you want to scale down from a larger scale model that we just run into the same problem that things get too small to actually print successfully. But you are correct that it will see the units that you label it as. You can convert that way. I just choose to model in truly HO scale because then I know exactly what I can realistically get away with a successful print every time and not have to worry about, well, will this print or not print? So.
Well, the thing I think a lot of modelers might not be aware of that I have become aware of because of some of my research that I've done is that the majority, especially the early Walters kits, the majority of the Walters kits are either Heljan or Trix. The steel mill stuff is almost exclusively Trix from Germany. And matter of fact, the Walters stuff used to say on it, made by Heljan for Walters.
Okay.
Of course, they knocked that off after a while. I don't know whether they just bought the models outright or paid them a giant fee, so they decided to.
So they could double the price and sell it that way.
But because the models are from Heljan, even though they're in HO scale and Trix, Heljan and Trix, they're all metric. And
okay.
Like if you measure the Walters downcomer from the blast furnace, it's 834 thousandths or something.
Yeah.
Which is a metric dimension if you did the math. I'd have to measure one again, but it comes out to be like a whole number in the metric system.
Right.
And so guys would try to get, everybody's, if you do the downcomer ought to be 7/8 tubing, and they would go buy 7/8 tubing, and of course it wouldn't fit because it was too big, because that's
Right.
875. And but what I discovered was that a half-inch PVC is 840 on average, because it's a pipe. Because it's pipe, it's all nominal dimensions, but and on average is kind of a misnomer too, because it's all quality control. I've measured stuff. It's pretty much always 840, but it's such a small difference in the two dimensions between the metric and the nominal pipe size, that you can use that if you want to extend your downcomer or change it or whatever, but you still want to hook up to the top works that's on the Walters kit.
Right.
And so I make stuff to do that, where it's 830 on one side and 840 on the other. A coupler to go from the Walters tubing to the PVC back to the Walters tubing.
Right.
But it's kind of a long-winded answer to James' comment about metric. But a lot of the guys, I mean, we both, for refinery models, for steel modelers, you're going to be using Walters kits a lot.
Right.
And knowing from the get-go that stuff is metric, and then when you try to extend it or build onto it with Evergreen or Plastruct stuff, which I guess Evergreen bought Plastruct, so I don't know if it's all going to become Evergreen now.
Did that just happen?
A few months ago.
Okay.
It's on their website.
Okay.
I don't know if they're moving everything to Chicago. Evergreen is enough. And I don't know if they'll be moving. I would assume they're going to move Plastruct to Chicago, because although we're still the Socialist Republic of Chicago, it's not as bad as California.
Yeah.
With taxes, and I mean, it's all plastic injection molding. I would assume that California EPA is probably all at their rear ends, but
yeah, probably.
But yeah, I mean, when you're trying to go from that metric stuff to Plastruct or Evergreen and Plastruct are all in standard dimensions, so it can be a bit of a challenge if you don't know that those kits are metric and not standard.
Yeah, I mean, I use more of Evergreen than I do Plastruct, but to each his own. I mean, it's the same stuff essentially. It's just a little bit different design. But I end up measuring it with calipers before I try and fit anything, just to make sure, because I guess I'm that nerdy that I want to make sure that what they've printed on the package actually is what's in the package, and that my parts are going to fit.
They're pretty close.
Yeah.
Their injection molding machines are really nice, and the dies are really nice. So what they report on their website is generally what the tubing really is. But the thing for you that's an advantage is that Evergreen goes to half-inch tubing.
Yep.
The thing that's a disadvantage to steel mill modelers is that Evergreen stops at half-inch tubing.
Yep.
There's a lot of downcomers and collecting mains and all those kind of things in a steel mill that are larger. Stove bodies are 2 inches or 2 1/4 if you're doing Whitwell stoves, so we're kind of stuck. We can either go with Plastruct, or we have to use something from another source.
Gotcha.
Like MasterCar or the hardware store or whatever. And Plastruct tends to have that in-between size tubing. They have 9/16 and 11/16, and they have some goofy size tubing. And if you're going to be a prototype modeler, you need to scale out pipe, that ends up being some goofy size pipe, a 82-inch pipe or something like that. You may be stuck with using Plastruct for us.
Right.
And and then you got thicker walls. I don't like some of the stuff because it has a thicker wall, just because it's heavier. But if you got to run with what you can. I mean, you use PVC I assume for the bodies of those devices that are behind you there.
Yeah, that was just a function of I didn't want to print a large column like that. That's crazy. And
No, you wouldn't.
yeah, and so that was just a, you know, and the hurdle with PVC is even Schedule 40 PVC has different wall thickness. So I ended up having to design the fittings to obviously fit the smaller hole opening. So if somebody goes and grabs PVC that's larger, it's going to be a looser fit. But I'm like, this is part of the scratch building component, you know, the customization that I think people expect it to be perfect. And while I strive for that every time, I will say, well, then go get the other 2-inch PVC pipe that has thicker walls, and it will be perfect. But
well, not to drive this beyond 2 hours, but I want to ask you a question. Do you know about PVC conduit and the thin wall PVC conduit?
yeah, I think I've between Lowe's and Home Depot, you know, and the resources and stuff I've done. I mean, I have a sample of everything from 6-inch down, both standard Schedule 40 and thin wall stuff. The thin wall, there's not as much of it. So, but that, I don't know what's available to everybody. And so I honestly, I just went down to the hardware store and I said, okay, if I design it to this, then generally probably 80% of the population has access to this. And so instead of trying to get something and order it online that's not at the hardware store, because then I'm like, I don't want everybody to have to jump online, because then you're always guessing because you can't go, you know, see it. Whereas if I send you the part, you can take the part to the hardware store and mate it up with the PVC that you're standing there in the aisle to make sure you're getting the right size. So that was kind of my mindset in designing some of this stuff. And it doesn't exist, but it's not perfectly prototypical. But, I mean, it's cool.
I try to stick to things that are available at Home Depot or Lowe's just because they're nationwide. I mean, I have Menards here. But I try to stick with Lowe's and Home Depot and McMaster Carr, because not everyone has access to McMaster Carr, but people do have access to Lowe's and Home Depot across the nation. And I would assume that they carry, you know, electrical supplies and plumbing supplies. I would assume that they carry kind of the same stuff all over the nation.
Yeah.
And so I do that. I try to where I don't have to ship them the material, the meat and potatoes material, the tubing or the piping or whatever.
Shipping has just gotten so crazy. Yeah, I'm not shipping PVC.
No.
It'll cost as much as the pipe.
I do market my stove bodies or my stoves where you can buy them with or without body, because some guys just want to do the bodies. And I order the material long and I cut it, and then I actually put it on a lathe at work. And I true up the ends.
Yeah.
So that when you get the thing and made the top of the stove to it, it's square.
Okay.
And then I also put the horizontal plate lines in it on the lathe, because I watched Jeff Bourne do plate lines with a hose clamp, and I cringed. Again, I'm lazy. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And for a nominal fee, a guy can order stoves from me with the bodies cut the length and trued up, and then the horizontal plate lines scribed in, and then they've got to do the vertical plate lines themselves. But those are really easy with a 12-inch rule and a scribe.
Yep.
But I have to order plastic tubing for those, because it's an exact size that you need for the outside diameter of the stoves. Then there's a little more shipping, because you're shipping for 3 or 4 pieces of tubing along with it. But
yeah.
I was just curious if you knew about the thin wall. I assume so, because you were an architect.
Yeah, the only 2 thin wall sizes that I can get are 3/4 and 1 inch here locally. They don't carry anything else in the thin wall.
I use brass tubing too.
Yeah, I haven't gone that route yet.
But that's from McMaster Carr.
Okay.
And I did it for my forced draft ducts, because the stacks are 1 inch. And the only thing that I could get in 1 inch was plastruct, and the wall thickness was crazy thick. And I could order brass tubing from McMaster Carr for $20,000. and so they look really nice.
Yeah,
Top of the stack.
I know I'll get to that point. Probably won't take too long. The beautiful thing is that the half, 3/4, 1 inch stuff that I'm using now is all for vertical column stacks, where I can the thick wall doesn't bother me because I've got a fitting system developed for the platforms that basically go in between two pieces of PVC to bridge that connection, and it works. But yeah, it won't be long where I get into some of the other specialty stuff that I'll have to go to brass or something else to make it work for sure.
I honestly just used brass because you could see the top of the stack, and I didn't want a really thick top because that always bothers me when I see smokestacks on a guy's model and the wall thickness, even on something from Walters or whatever. I think the thickness is too thick. And these particular forced draft ducts, the stacks were steel, and so they're still there. I think the stacks are removed now, but draft ducts are still there. But on some of the photos that I had, you see the top of the stack, and you could tell that it was just a steel plate that was probably, I don't know what you would make the real ones out of, 1/8" steel or something.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to look really nice, so out of brass, and then I just sell them with the brass stacks. I've got
Yeah, James, I'll have to check some electrical supply stuff. That's a great point because I just not looked into the brass side of stuff yet. So your comment there is perfect. And I've got plenty of electrical connections that that would be a simple, it'd probably be cheaper too.
Yeah, see, that's an advantage of this show. And then, James's business, he's not he could be a professional modeler, but he's got a real job too, quote unquote, like the rest of us. And I think that's a big advantage when you've got someone that's a scratch builder in their own, when they can look to their own industry. I know this kind of stuff. You can buy this here, or they've talked to a friend that's in, an industry where he would go to a supply place and know that there's central vacuum piping there, than wall PVC. I mean, the creativity level is as far as it goes as far as your imagination and ability to ask other people, hey, have you ever seen something like this? Oh yeah, I use that.
Yep.
So
it's awesome stuff.
All right, we're 7 minutes over 2 hours now. So
all right, let's wrap this one up.
I'm going to bed.
Yeah, it's 11:08, so it's been a while. It's been fun. I enjoyed the last time we talked, and I knew that once we got rolling, it wouldn't take long, and we'll keep hammering away, offline to develop the content. But I would like to maybe get started with an R&D kind of piece, is maybe a way to establish a base for how we really dig into developing, maybe one specific model for the steel mill side, and I can pick, maybe the direct fire heater on the refinery side, and how I got to where I'm at, and how you do a blast furnace, because I know you've got one you're planning on rolling out the blast furnace here before too long, the FDM.
Yeah, it'll be this year. It'll be before Christmas. I'll out the
so it might be kind of cool for you to talk about how you got to the dimensions and the way you model it and those kinds of things before you roll that out would be kind of fun. So
cool.
Well, I've got that link's already posted. So
an hour or two, so we're not.
Yeah, we should
do an hour or two, so that we're not making people slodge through 2 hours of the podcast.
And maybe we should start 30 minutes before we're supposed to be live. Instead of the last minute.
With my modem dying this morning didn't really help. So.
Oh, but we'll get all that hammered out. I guess that's part of the fun. So, guys, thanks for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button. Let other folks know what we're doing. Kevin and I, I'm sure, are going to come up with a lot of cool content here as things get rolling. And quite frankly, I'll just throw it out there. I'm excited to do some type of collaborative project here down the road as we get this thing rolling. So
that would be cool too.
I think we could have a lot of fun with that.
Okay.
All right.